Hey, welcome to Beyond Design. So, continuing with our series on rotoscoping, today we'll be doing rotoscoping on an organic object that's a human object. We have previously seen how to do rotoscoping on a tree, but the thing with the tree was a tree does not change its shape, specifically the part that we had rotoscoped. So, when you have a challenge like this, that is when you have to rotoscope a human being or maybe something which is organic, which is deforming and moving altogether. So, this is something, a neat trick that you can follow and you can use for doing rotoscoping. I'll also show you certain don'ts that people do, but then it's like it's something that you should avoid on a long run. So let's play this and check. Okay, so what I've done is I've done this rotoscoping that you can see on the screen. That is, I have rotoscoped this leg over here. You can see the pink leg. So this is a rotoscoped object, and now we'll learn how we can proceed further and do this kind of rotoscoping. I have taken not many frames over here. There are only 30 frames in the composition. So let's go ahead and start and let's see how we can do this. So I'll go to a composition which is fairly new, but I have done certain things over here. So we'll see what I have done exactly. So first thing where people go wrong, let me go to 18th frame because that's a very nice position to start, because you can see the entire length of the leg over here that we need to rotoscope. Now, coming back, there are ways people do rotoscoping, and there is a very wrong way of doing rotoscoping. And please avoid this one, the first one. So let's make a new solid, and I'll just give it a color, maybe a reddish color, a reddish pinkish color, something like that. And I'll say OK to this. And I'll hide the solid. That's how we do compositing. Is we hide the solid, then we add shapes, and then we turn it on and use it as an alpha. So let's take the pen tool, and this is a very wrong way of doing it. This is how people do it. They'll make a shape. I'm just making a very rough shape, no curves, nothing. And they'll encompass the entire feet in one shape. This is okay if you're doing editing inside Photoshop, and if it's a still image or maybe it's something which is not going to deform too much the way we had the tree last time. So if you are gonna do this with a leg, understand this. First of all, the positioning of the points is completely wrong. There are no proper beziers available over here. Secondly, the feet is deforming. It's moving, it's changing. So if you just have one single shape and if you try to achieve this with a single shape, it's going to be very problematic. So as far as possible, please avoid this technique in which you encompass the entire leg or maybe entire hand or maybe entire human body into one shape. Please avoid this technique. I'll do one thing, I'll delete this. And I'll make a new solid now. This is technique number 2. It's a good technique to follow inside After Effects, but there are certain drawbacks with this techniques also. So we'll understand that. So we'll make a solid. Let me take a little lighter color. I think the pink was too much last time. Yeah, this thing should be good. And I'll say, okay, let me just hide the layer. And this is technique number 2. Now in technique number 2, what we do is we break our object or break the object that we need to rotoscope into separate parts the way our human anatomy performs. So this is what we do. We'll create a shape. Once more I'm creating a very rough shape for the hip region. This is shape number 1. So if you go to this solid, you can see there is one shape available over here. You can just enter and name this hip left. And then we'll once more select the solid. We'll make a new shape now. Maybe I'll just start from outside, then we can later on adjust this. And let me just make a rough shape again. And then I can just adjust this over here, adjust this over here, and I can just name this. This becomes the thigh left. And then we'll break it down even further. So we'll just take this and we'll make another shape over here. This is just a rough shape that I'm creating right now. So don't worry, we'll make a proper shape later. and this is what we have. So this becomes like calves, left. So what we have done over here is a very nice technique in which we have divided one single leg into different shapes. But the technique that I've used over here is we have done all this into one solid layer. This technique is good, okay, because it gives you this option. If you just select this shape now and I just go to and my selection tool and just double click over here, so this gives me the transform handle. I can press Y on the keyboard and just change this pivot point over here. So now if I rotate, the rotation happens, okay, right from there, like a human movement, like a human feet movement. But then if I lose the selection and if I select it again, maybe on some other frame, the problem that is going to happen is the pivot point has gone back over here in the center. So that's one issue that you'll face when you're using this technique. So it's like, for example, if I select this shape of the thigh, and if I press Y on the keyboard and just place this over here, and now if I rotate, yeah, it's good for right now because the selection is still there. But as soon as I lose the selection and I make the selection again, the anchor point or the pivot point of this particular shape has gone back to the center. So we have to realign it, readjust it. So it's a good technique, but it's like time consuming. So what I've done in this series or in this tutorial is, let me just delete the shape, and I'm on frame number 18 because I have done my initial rotoscope, the first rotoscope on frame number 18. Always remember, choose the frame in which your object is visible to you at least 80 to 90%. There's a very less chance that you'll get a visibility of 100%, but for me it is now more than 90% that I can see the shape over here. Now what I've done is I have taken three different solids. So I've taken a solid for pelvis, I've taken a solid for the thigh, and I've taken the solid for the calves. And I've given them three separate colors so it's easy for us to recall and see it properly. So this is what we have. We have three different shapes. Now the good point or the good thing about this technique is every individual layer has a anchor point. So I can simply come now, press Y on the keyboard, and just put the pivot point someplace over here because this is where the motion is going to happen from, or maybe something if you study anatomy, the movement happens someplace from, let me just zoom in, sorry for this. And let's press Y and get this thing, maybe someplace over here. This is where the movement of pelvis happens from. Same way, I can go to the thigh now, select this thigh layer, and now change its center point to someplace over here. So it pivots. Maybe you can turn the snapping on, so it snaps in properly. And then for the calves, I can just go down and I can take this Y and I can just place it someplace over here because this is where the calves movement will happen. Now this time I'll turn the snapping off so that I can center it more properly. Press Y and get this thing over here. So what happens in this is, like previous technique, this is exactly, we are anchoring it, and the best point is we can rotate it, and the other best point is whatever frame you go to, the anchor point is still where we want it, because the anchor point has changed not for the selection, but it has changed for the entire layer altogether. So this is the good part about working on this technique. Many people call this thing as characterizing the roto. They're called as breaking the shape of roto. You call it whatever you want to call it. I have basically used the human anatomy and I have broken the shapes. So this becomes easier for me to animate. And the other good point about having them on separate layers is we can parent them. So I can say the thigh layer will be parented to the pelvis layer, because when the pelvis moves, it's like human anatomy, like an FK. If you have done rigging or something in Maya or maybe Max or something like that in any 3D application, so it's like this is now the parent, and if this thing rotates or this thing moves, everything moves below it. So I'm saying the thigh is now parented to the pelvis, the calf is parented to the thigh. So what happens now is, now if I go to pelvis, I press P on the keyboard and I move this. Can you see this? What's happening? The entire hierarchy is moving. Same if I go to the thigh now and I press R on the keyboard, I can simply rotate it. Same way I can go to the calves, I can press R on the keyboard. It was already on, and I can rotate this. Can you see that? So it's that simple when you're working. And this is the reason why I have broken the shapes into multiple joints so that I can do a parenting over here, I can do a hierarchy over here, and I can simply make my roto more simpler. And in this technique, it is very simple, and see what I'm going to do now. I'll start with the parent one, that's the pelvis. And let me just do one thing. Let's select all the layer, press T on the keyboard and make the opacity as 25%. So we get to see the footage in the background. And now I'll go to the pelvis, press P on the keyboard, and I'll say Shift R for the rotation. And on the 18th frame, I'll key the position and I'll key the rotation. And now we'll look at the movement, we'll study the movement. Okay, now the bone will move from here to here, it's going up. So I can simply take this shape, drag it over here, and because the rotation is happening, I can also rotate this and align this and keep it proper. No matter the shapes are not coming proper right now, that's okay, because that's something that we need to tweak. But believe me, 30 to 40% of your work will happen just by doing position and rotation keyframing. Rest is just getting the shapes proper. This we have already seen earlier, so you can adjust that, but we'll still see it for the thigh. You can also try it for the calf and the other shapes altogether. So this is what we have, and you can see the movement now. See this, much simpler. And now I can see in between, okay, there is some loss, and I can just position this thing better. And now play this and check. You can see that. So now it's aligned properly. Now let's go from 18 to backwards. So let's go to 0 right now. And this thing is someplace over here. So let's change the position. And definitely it needs to go up. And it needs to go a little here. And now I can check. And see this? It's actually properly following the movement without us doing much. But believe me, if you had used any of the previous two techniques, this would have cost you a lot. Just to give a proper motion over here, I'm just coming in between and just positioning it a bit better so that the curve of the body movement is maintained. And we get this aligned. Now we can go and we can go to the thigh bone and we can start rotating this now. You can press R on the keyboard. The best part is always keyframe at the position where you have already keyframed the earlier bone. So you can just come to pelvis and press U on the keyboard, and you can go to now thighs and you can say R, and let's start this on frame number 18. We'll first keyframe this because that's where we started. That's the parent keyframe, and then we'll go back to 24. We'll see what happens over here. Maybe rotation has to be something like this. You can definitely tweak it and use any other technique. This technique works for me. And this thing is quite aligned. I'll just put a keyframe over here still. I'll go to maybe something like 0. And now I can see, okay, the rotation is supposed to be here. And then I can come down to this keyframe because that was the keyframe that we followed. I'll just put a keyframe over here and just align it proper. Goes good. And now if you see this, in between there is a bit of a lag. If you can see the shape is not actually following this. So I can now come in between, I can just realign the rotation. So now additional keyframes will be put over there. Now check this. Okay, now we are losing some pixels over here. So just align this and get this thing right. We'll be definitely tweaking the shape, so that's okay. Just get this thing right. Yeah, see this? There's a big mismatch. Maybe I can try it with the rotation. But I think this is more or less, we'll have to work with the shape rather than the rotation. So I think we're good to go with this. Now let's go for the calves. And let's come back to 18. Same way, I'll just turn this off, go to calves and say R on the keyboard. Let's hit a keyframe. Let's go to 24 and let's see what's happening over here. Let's adjust the calves a bit. And then till here, I think we'll have to adjust the calves a bit more because they are rotating. And then we have to adjust the shape for getting this thing proper. Now same way, I'll come over here and you can definitely see there is a big mismatch. Let's rotate this, get this thing aligned. The shape is changing, that's okay. That's something that we have to manage with the shape. if you are a beginner and you're actually rotoscoping this will save a lot of time. But then yeah, definitely adjusting the shape and getting it to the proper flow of the jeans and all that. You can maybe additionally add some more shapes for the wrinkles and everything. But believe me, it's going to take you not less than 3.5 hours to complete only this much, 30 frames. Okay, if you are a beginner. If you're an expert, definitely it will be much more faster. But for tutorial's sake, I'll be skipping in between and I'll be directly jumping to the final output. But first, let's tweak some parts over here. So let's just play this and let me just zoom out. And now I can just click outside and I can play, buffer this and check. Can you see that? Major movement of this lady walking has been covered over here by simple positioning and rotation. But now what remains is the detailing. So if let's just concentrate on the thigh solid over here. So we'll go to the thigh and we'll make it solo with the background so that we can only concentrate on this part. And now best way is 18. I think I have properly matched it. But let's go to this frame, that is the keyframe for the movement. And now here is where we can start working. So I can say, okay, now this is the point where, sorry, let me just come and click on this and I can say, okay, you go over here, you can adjust it. There is some loose gap over here in the pixels, just adjust this. Even the thigh at the background in the back is causing a problem, and this point has to go someplace over here. Maybe there is some realignment that we'll need to do just for matching it more proper. This is something that we also need to tweak once more when all the shapes are on. But then one mistake that I have done, okay, now this is a very terrible mistake, and good I did this, is now if you go to 18, your shape will be completely messed up. The reason being, you did not shape the path, you did not key the path. So press M on the keyboard and just say mask path key. Now please do this step, because otherwise this is a big mistake. You do 100 frames of rotoscoping, then you buffer and see and nothing has happened because you forgot one simple step, that is animating the path. So this is something that I did very bad, but then good, it happened. So let's adjust this again and get this thing aligned properly according to frame number 18. And let's get this thing right. I think this goes over here. Looks good. Now we'll go to frame number 9, adjust this thing right. So now the shape is getting keyed. Okay, now this is very important. Don't forget this step. You have to keyframe the mask path. Very important. And I did it wrong. My bad. Go to 0. Adjust this. See this? There's a big gap which is happening over here. You can just adjust this. You can get this thing aligned properly. Someplace here. And get this thing proper. Get this thing right. This thing is looking good. That's okay. Then I can go to 24. Oh, where is it? Yeah, it's someplace over here. Let me just zoom in. And now I can just come down and I can just adjust this. Get this thing in. Get this thing in. Get this thing aligned. Get this thing proper. This has to go a bit out, because this part will be covered by the carve, so I don't need to worry about it so much. Even this internal shape, that's why I'm not doing anything to them. 30, I can just adjust this thing again and get this thing right. So now it's a matter of zooming out. You can say Control Shift H, or you can just deselect the layer. I prefer Control Shift H, and now buffer this and check. Okay, it's happening, but there are certain loose ends that I can see over here, like specifically this region. There is a big loss in the roto shape and the jeans. So I can say Control Shift H again and adjust this thing. Get this thing aligned. Get this thing corrected. Maybe use the Bezier. That's a better way of doing it. So undo this and get this thing inside. Get this thing inside. Get this thing right. Okay, now once more say Control Shift H, zoom out, buffer, and then we have to go once more in between, check things like over here. The roto shape is actually going outside the jeans area. So I can say Control Shift H, get this thing right. So on and so forth. You have to go on checking this, correcting this, getting the shape right, doing the roto, and this is what rotoscoping is. It is just like doing 2D animation. You have to go really detailed, and you have to be really smart on how to keyframe. Okay, so this is what we have done, and good. This is how you are supposed to continue and do this. For the tutorial sake, I'm not going to show you the entire process, but then now I'll show you how the complete shape looks like. So what I'll do now is I'll just turn this off and turn all these layers off, which we have. Let me turn the shy layers because I've already done the rotoscoping for everything that you have over here. So it's from here till the shoes. So if you see how many shapes I have created like a pelvis shape. I'll keep the footage on. Sorry, the footage on. Then you have the thighs. Then you have the calves. Then you have the knee. Then you have the shoes back, and then you have a shoe front. And everything has been properly pivoted. So if you just select this and I say Control Shift H again, see this, everything's pivot point has been kept properly. In this, I have kept the pivot point over here. I should have kept it over here. That was much more better, much more controlled. Thighs, I have kept the pivot point over here. Calves, I have kept the pivot point over here. Knee, that is the feet region, I have kept it over here. The shoe, I have kept it over here. The shoe back, the pivot point is over here. And the shoe front, it's been kept over here. So now what you can do is you can simply, I'll just delete all these layers that we had created for the practice. And now select all these layers, whatever we have, all the mask which is present over here, all the solids, and just pre-compose it. And I'll call this thing as left feet comp. I'll call it new because I may have a old composition over there. New comp, and I'll say okay. So now what can be done is I can simply duplicate this. Okay, a layer has been duplicated of the same footage, or yeah, we can do that. And let me just turn the solo off and turn the solo on for this. We can go to effects, we can go to curves, and we can just add the curve on this particular layer. I'll go to the red channel and just increase the red a bit. Okay, and let me just close this, let me just close this. And then I'll go to the modes and I'll say use the alpha matte from the left feet comp. That is what we have at the top. So that only this thing has been visible now, and I can now see this thing on the footage. So this is how we did the rotoscoping. So it's a process of simply following and creating, working with the anatomy. And it's better if you're rotoscoping a human anatomy, think that object has actual bones and try to structure it. It may take a bit more time, but just structure your rotoscopes properly. Later, when you're working on the complete rotoscope, it will save you a lot of time when you're working. Hope you guys enjoyed this technique of rotoscoping. Until we meet next time, thank you.